Well, I wanna record a second video today, and beginning with a little bit of an apology for some background noise that you might hear. We have some. We live in a 16-story apartment building with two towers, and there's some construction going on in one of the in the other tower above us. But you can maybe hear it in the background. So please apologies for that. I'm continuing a theme. I'm continuing a theme that I began 2 or 3 weeks ago, related to my challenges with communicating with people in my life from my past, specifically referring to some of my siblings, and then other people that I knew in my past from my former evangelical / fundamentalist period of life that lasted around 35 years. I've said several times that of those 35 years, for about 25 of those years was spent in pursuit of Christian ministry as a pastor, and that's what I did. It was a full-time occupation for a big chunk of that time. But since that, and it's now been, I'm just approaching, I'll be 70 years old in 2026. And I began about a 10-year I call it a deconversion. Some people refer to it as deconstruction. But the way it worked out for me was, the more I, quote, deconstructed the belief system in which I had been in since I was at the age of 19. I converted to Christianity when I was 19 years old. From that point up into about the time that I'm going to say 55, I was a born-again believer. I was a evangelical fundamentalist, and by that I mean that I held that the Bible was literally true in all its aspects, had no errors in it, was divinely inspired, or as we used to say, God breathed, that the authors had accurately conveyed the precise message that God wanted them to convey in the text of the both Old and New Testaments. And so I believed I was a six-day creationist. I was anti-abortion. I was anti-LGBTQ. I was conservative, politically conservative, all of those things. And so I began sometime around my 55th year to seriously attempt to deconstruct all of that, or at least begin to really look at it from a very honest perspective. And when I say honest, I mean that I was no longer going to try to, I made this as a very clear point of decision in my life when I decided that I was going to no longer try to find an excuse for something that felt very obvious. And I may touch on that as I go through this video, but so that began this long 10-year-ish process in which the deconstructing part just very quickly became an exercise towards deconversion, meaning that the doctrines that underpinned my belief system just began to fall away. I began to discard them for a number of reasons. One reason would be the immoral nature of the doctrines, such as blood atonement. You know, I don't want to chase all those out. Maybe I'll do another video about those, but there are a number of things. The violence of God, the violent character of God, why he seemed to be so, hell-bent, so to say, on sending people to hell. For me, that became a real moral issue. And I know that Christian believers like to say, oh, that's the justice of God. Don't you want justice? Well, sure, everybody, most reasonable people want justice, but it has to be reasonable. And it has to be reasonable, and it has to have an element, and from my moral perspective today, it has to have an element of redeemability to it. And the quote-unquote justice of the God of the Bible is completely irredeemable. I think that's the right way to say that. But anyway, so the doctrines begin to fall away, my values begin to change. My opinions, my perspectives, my beliefs about humanity begin to radically shift. And all of that took a long time. For me, when I was in my early 50s, after I left the ministry, in my late 40s, I lost my entire identity as a person. I no longer had a sense of who I was, what I was doing, what I was supposed to be doing, if you will, but mostly my identity just simply collapsed. And I felt, when I looked in the mirror, I felt like I didn't know who I was looking at. I didn't recognize anybody. I didn't recognize me. And so it really became a quest. It has become now a life purpose for me to not only know who I am as a person in my own perspective and my own evaluation, but also to know what my values are. Excuse me, just a little adjustment here. To know what my values are, apart from what other people tell me I should believe. Even how I should behave. I mean, I tore down my morals. I really, really did. I gave myself permission to do whatever I felt like I wanted to do. And much to my surprise, my core values, my core morals did not really change very much. They just simply took on a different meaning for me. And again, I'll probably make a video around that as a concept, around that as an idea. But so anyway, and I don't want to ramble too much. I don't want to keep chasing around thoughts that go here and there. But so I began this process in my mid-50s, and 5 years into the process, around my 60th birthday, I came to the honest recognition that I no longer believed in any gods. I don't believe in anything supernatural. I just don't believe those things occur outside of the imaginations of humans, and specifically the religious imaginations of humans. And so today what I wanted to talk about is what my worldview is now as an agnostic atheist. I leave a slight variant degree of opening for the possibility that there may be something else other than the material world. I just, it's, for the life of me, I can't find anything that validates that there's an alternate reality besides the one that I live in, which goes a long way to shaping my worldview, goes a long way to shaping my perspective on what it means to be a sentient being, a conscious being in a physical world. People refer to this as, people have asked before, and I hear on YouTube videos and that kind of stuff, oftentimes Christian, especially Christian or Muslim apologists will ask, well, what is your worldview? What is your ultimate, your absolute foundation, the grounding of your truth in your life? You've got to have one. Okay, all right. I know that's a projection of their belief system onto me. Christians are just infamous for doing this. Yeah, babe. Oh, sorry. Are just infamous for projecting their belief system onto the world, because their worldview is an absolutist worldview. You have to believe like they believe. And it doesn't matter whatever denominational sect they find themselves in, or the homemade conundrum of ideas. You've got to believe it like they believe it, or you're not really a true, true Christian, true believer. So they referred to that. What is your worldview? And I've heard on YouTube a number of rather arrogant Christian apologists talking about what is your what do they call that? Objective, absolute grounding of all things, all meaning. And so obviously theirs is that God, there is this omnipotent, omniscient, omnipresent, omnibenevolent, etc. God, or maximally potent, maximally benevolent, etc. God, who's behind all of this, and this being, I forget how William Lane Craig says it, one of the most irritating apologists out there. Boy, you talk to somebody who can frustrate the living shit out of me. This idea that the mindless, I forget, if you're familiar with these kind of videos, you'll know how he describes it. And he talks about it as if it's just an absolute necessity for existence. And so in light of all of that, and it has taken me quite some time to work my way through all of these things. Part of that has been getting educated and making sure I can do my best to steelman the arguments or the positions of both sides, whether we're talking about evolution versus creationism or whatever the case may be. It took a lot of education, a lot of reading, listening to a lot of university lectures, which I tend to enjoy to do. Those kind of things, listening to science educators online explaining various things, people like Sean Carroll and other people like that. But anyway, so it took me a lot of education to get to the point where I could intelligently talk about the things that helped shape my worldview. And so it has become, I suppose, people would say, oh, you're I don't know, philosophical naturalist, maybe, or something like that. I'm not sure of all those terms, but yeah, that's right. I believe I am well substantiated. Is that the right word? I think I'm on good, solid ground for believing that I exist in a material universe, in a universe made up of particulate matter in quantum fields that over time and through the natural processes of physical law coalesce and form more complexity from very simplistic matter to more complexity, etc., and on until bingo, you get this, you get me, you get you get all of this kind of stuff that just so happens to exist on a physical planet in a physical universe. And the apologist, the religious apologist, just bemoans the idea that, oh my God, what do you do about purpose and meaning? What do you do about, you mean you're just, they like to say, you were made out of nothing? You know, that's not what the theory of the beginning of our presentation of our current universe is. It wasn't from nothing. It's we're not even sure there is such a thing as nothing. At least in our universe, I mean, you know, there's just no such thing as that. There's always been something. And even though that something may appear as nothing because our limited minds and perceptions cannot perceive beyond a certain limit. And so it may appear as nothing, but in fact, there's probably always been something. That a universe from nothing idea is really a projection, again, of apologists who believe that God created something out of nothing. But that's not the view of cosmology. That's not that. That is not that theory. And so it's a bit disingenuous to say you believe in something came from nothing. No, that's what you believe. I don't believe that. Matter of fact, I'm not really sure that I can say I believe in anything per se. It's just that the current explanations for the beginning of the universe are plausible because they're observable, currently observable, and measurable. And by that I mean that we can watch suns and even galaxies going through these natural processes of creation and destruction. And so anyway, so if you're going to say that, yeah, well, you're a philosophical naturalist, I think that's the term. Maybe so, but more so, I am really a pragmatic naturalist. I cannot get by without the pragmatism of the physical world, of the physical universe. If it weren't for the physical universe, I wouldn't be here. Best I can tell. And so that is the foundation of my worldview. And so when it comes to the argument of, well, yeah, but where does love come from? Where does logic come from? Where do the laws of nature come from? These kind of questions, to me, are, first of all, malinformed or malformed. Because let me just start with, love. I'll take the first one I mentioned, love. Love is a human emotion. It is just a natural expression of how a social species expresses itself toward other members of that species and other species and the planet as a whole. But our human love, if it comes from God, leaves a lot to be desired. And even the so-called love of God that is so highly referred to by apologists in the Bible, you have to be honest. Have you really read all these passages about the so-called character of God? When you look at the Old Testament, when you even looking in the New, people say, oh, the New Testament corrects so much of the Old Testament. First of all, why does a perfect God need to correct anything? But the other thing is, in the Old Testament, the wrath of God was, it was always imminent. You never knew when you were going to piss him off. You never knew who was going to piss him off. You never knew what little thing was going to trigger him into some fucking, maniacal expression of violence. And so the Old Testament doesn't really emphasize too much about the love of God, because it's kind of a little hard to say. It's kind of like living with it, which I grew up with, an abusive father. It's like living in an abusive home where there's a lot of family violence. Yeah, there were times when there was, quote unquote love that came from my father, but it was always a little scary because you never knew what was going to trigger the next outburst of rage. And it was the same way with God in the Old Testament. So, along comes Jesus. And Jesus is, going right along, man. He's healing the sick, of course, born of a virgin, and does his thing, don't judge here and don't do this, and hey, love everybody. And by the way, though, at the end of the whole thing, if you don't agree, if you don't believe, if you don't submit, I'm going to roast your ass in the flames of eternal fire, for all eternity, because you did not accept me the way I wanted to be accepted. You didn't accept me as your savior, so you want some love, baby? Here you go. And I know all the excuse begging that comes from Christians. Oh, no, God doesn't send anybody to hell. God, the people's in themselves. Hell is really just separation from God. All these kind of lame bullshit excuses. One of my biggest problems that's related to my worldview that really kind of entrenches me more and more in my view is the disingenuousness of modern evangelicals. The dishonesty, just straight out dishonesty. They know that for the last 2,000 years, classic Christianity, for the most part, generally speaking, described eternal punishment in a certain way. The fires of hell, as I understand it, back in the Middle Ages, if that's the correct term to use for that time period, when the Catholic Church pretty much ruled, authoritatively anyway, most of Europe. When heretics or whomever were put to death, a lot of their motivation was they wanted them to get a taste of what it would be like to burn for all eternity. So they created some hellacious torture devices. They wanted to keep them as alive for as long as possible, so they could suffer as much as possible before they died, so they would get a pre-taste of what they were about to get in the fires of hell. And nowadays, though, Christians are like, they would. By the way, nobody's ever a true Christian. They weren't true Christians. Yeah, I get it. Yeah, right on. I call that excuse begging. But the dishonesty, the disingenuousness, it's almost become a pedantic game of wordplay meanings with Christian apologists when I listen to them, and it's like there's no one better. There's no one better at dancing around the meaning of words than Christian apologists, in my opinion. Okay, I'm way off track. Let me come back to my worldview. So yes, I believe that the physical world is all that there is. Carl Sagan, one of my favorite quotes. I forget exactly how he says it, but the universe is all that there is, all that there was, and all that there ever will be, as far as we are concerned. As far as we can detect, this is all we have. And so I believe I'm fully justified in establishing my life, my worldview, my perspective, my worldview on the idea of pragmatic naturalism, because I have no other choice. When it comes to the claims of supernaturalism, whether it's an apocalyptic preacher who rises from the dead, or somebody finding their car keys or a parking space as a miracle, I have no use for those things. I have no use for the stories, the claims of personal divine revelation. it doesn't help me. It certainly doesn't inspire me. If anything, it confuses me. Well, maybe not confuses me. It just makes me see the frailty of your humanity, and the fact that you are so bound in your own fears and hang-ups and anxieties that you feel like you have to have some personal savior come to your rescue. I'm sorry for that judgment, that I have to, say that judgment publicly, but that's how I feel about it. I'll say it like this: you're just weak. You're weak in your own self. One of the most detrimental things that Christianity did to me, and I find this is true in almost all religions. I've yet to find a religion that doesn't use this technique in some form or another. Look, we are frail creatures, emotionally, mentally, physically. There are times where we can be toppled over by a feather. And we live in a fearful world. We live in a world of violence that does not appear to give one care about your well-being. And so Christianity, along with most all of other religions, use this technique of our weakness to imply, either directly or indirectly, that we should somehow despise our natural selves. We should despise our humanity. I had a taste of Calvinism back in the day. The acronym of TULIP: total depravity, unlimited atonement. Unlimited atonement. Limited atonement. I forget them all. But the first one is total depravity, and the idea that you are a worthless mass of whatever it is we are, sinners in the hands of an angry God, objects of God's wrath. I remember a senior pastor that I worked under in the last big church that I was a pastor who said I forget how many, there are 4 or 5 reasons why the Bible says you deserve the tortures of hell. You were conceived in sin, you're born in sin, you habitually sin, and God declares you an object of his wrath. And because of all of those reasons, you're just a filthy piece of dung. What was that old hymn? Amazing Grace, how sweet the sound that saved a wretch like me. I forget. There were a couple of the older hymns that referred to this doctrine that taught that you should just loathe who you are as a person. Now, modern evangelicalism, modern Christianity has supplanted that a couple of different ways. One is they tried to ease that doctrine by saying, but once you get into Jesus, you now have value. But before Jesus, there's no value. You have to get into Jesus to have any, you have to take on another completely different personality, another completely different identity, not personality, but identity, in order to have any value to God. Otherwise, you're an object of his wrath. So modern evangelicalism, they're kind of having a hard time, especially in the bigger, more sophisticated churches. Now they don't like to talk about that depravity shit anymore. Instead, what they say, you can change your life in Jesus. You can be this and do that and all those. It's just a menagerie of I don't know, adaptation to the culture or something. I'm getting lost in my words a little bit there, but this doctrine of me being a worthless sinner outside of Jesus, you've got to get rid of your humanity. One of my verses, Galatians 2:20, I am crucified with Christ. Nevertheless, I live, yet not I, but it's Christ that lives in me. Paul, the Apostle Paul, the asshole that he was, you got to die to yourself, deny the flesh, live like me, don't get married, don't have kids, just jack off 10 times a day. I don't know what he did. But just the misogynistic, no, I'm getting down rabbit trail. But this whole idea that the New Testament promotes so vividly is that as a human being, you are worthless apart from this belief system that we have established. So that took me a lot to work my way out of. To stop thinking of myself in such detrimental, self-destructive terms, even as a Christian. I can do no good apart from, except for the grace of God, there go I. All that kind of nonsense. Those are roots that really, really wrap in tight. And man, you have to dig them out, cartilage by cartilage, or whatever the terminology for roots is. To get that kind of bad thinking out of your system, and which I have done. I've sufficiently done along with that went the accompanying evil twin of apocalypticism, catastrophizing. The world is so deserving. The world is going to hell, and it deserves every bit of it. Yeah. Believers have been saying that for 2,000 years, and guess who still hasn't shown up to do it? Jesus is going to come back with a flaming sword, and he's going to whack the hell out of all of his enemies. All right, yeah. And I'll believe it when I see it. Because it's been 2,000 years, and that religion now is getting pretty damn long in the tooth as religions go. All religions have their expiration date, and that expiration date is when people stop believing in the God. It's funny how many gods have disappeared from history when people stopped believing in them. Anyway, so back to my worldview. I refer to myself as a pragmatic naturalist. I have no other choice. I can't make myself believe something that I can't get to, that I can't get to materialize. But beyond that, the counter argument from apologists, from religions in general, well, you're just a filthy sinner, and you deserve hell, and you're blinded by the God of this world because you trust in yourself and all. Yeah, right on. Knock yourself out. For my part, I do trust in myself to some degree. I listen to myself more. I ask myself more probing questions about my beliefs. Am I sure I'm understanding the nature of what I'm experiencing? Am I experiencing possibly a form of delusion in some way? I tell you, maybe I'll chase this for a little bit. An interesting thought experiment was, let's suppose you said to me that, no, Ken, you're under the influence of Satan, the God of this world, who has blinded your eyes, okay? And so I would say, okay, all right, can you demonstrate that to me? The way I'd like to have it demonstrated is not from you, though. Because isn't it interesting that every Christian who claims to have absolute knowledge or claims to have knowledge about the absolute can never get the absolute being to show up on the scene? Instead, we're stuck with you. And in all honesty, I'm not that impressed with you. I'm not all that impressed with your ability to logic your way to God, or to believe your way to being a new creature in Christ. I'm not impressed by any of that, because I look at you and you're kind of like just like me, except you got this really weird belief system going on. But it's your point. So, if you'd want to really take that thought experiment and say, okay, I'm going to prove to you that Satan has blinded your eyes. Hey, let the dude show. Come on, let him show. I don't want to hear anything else from you. Be quiet. Stop talking. Let God show up, or let the devil show up. Right now. Here, let me scoot over in case either one wants. I have an empty chair right here. Just show up. Huh? Let your God do the work. Oh, he wants to use humans as a vessel. That's excuse begging. If you want to counter my argument, get your deity or demigod to show up and confront me with my errors. But if I have to just keep listening to you, you're going to exhaust me with your pathetic, whatever you want to call them. So my worldview isn't it? I have no other choice. I have to rely on my senses. I have to rely on the limited intelligence that I have. I have to rely on what's the word I want to use? The experiences that have been tainted by so many other things. That's why I'm open to listening to other people. Help me understand what I don't understand. If I've made an incorrect statement, a factually incorrect statement in this video, please correct me. But you have to correct me with evidence. If you want to have a conversation with me, you've got to come prepared. Because I'm no longer into personal testimonies, bro. Because for every Christian testimony that I get about how glorious Jesus is, I can find you just as many Muslims, just as many Hindus, just as many Buddhists who can deliver an equally compelling, emotionally based testimony. It just doesn't impress me. It's not my experience. That's your experience. And in all honesty, I'm just getting tired of your experience. Where's your God? Where is he? Jesus promised to be right back. Right back. Some of you standing here will not die. Well, what he really meant was, I don't care. Excuse begging. Either your God is going to show up or he's not. What's the difference between a God who is invisible and a God who doesn't exist? What's the difference? Oh no, isn't it convenient that God is both everywhere and nowhere all at once? All the time. Gee, I wonder if there's another possibility besides an excuse. Could it be? Could it be? The God just doesn't exist? Maybe Jesus got lost on the way home to heaven. He's somewhere in another galaxy going, where the fuck? So my worldview, pragmatic naturalist, if that's even a terminology, I'll take it. Because for me, at my point in life, I'm close to the end now. I'm in the short line, as they say. My life has to make sense to me. I don't care if it makes sense to you. I don't care if you've got all of these contrived reasons for why I'm hell-bound. It's a reality that I can manage. It's, for the most part. It's a reality that I can understand for the most part. I've said this to myself multiple times. I began to say this to myself many, many years ago. I can only manage one reality at a time. You want me to manage this reality, and then you want to slather on top of that another reality, which I can't even come close to producing evidence for, other than believing you, and I don't necessarily believe you. So that is kind of, in short, my worldview as the way I think about it. I've got other thoughts, and I'm going to make another video about this. I've gotten it more precise in some ways, and I've done a ton of writing on this and journaling about it, but this is how I feel. I don't mean to say any of these things really necessarily confrontational or condemning. I just grow weary. I'm just growing fatigued of this insistent demand that I comply with what you believe. But my beliefs, totally worthless, irrelevant, wrong, misguided, deceived. Okay, all right. Do I think you're deceived? You tell me. I'm just grown weary of this aggressive form of personal belief being foisted upon, the United States especially, but even foisted upon me by people that I want to have relationships with, but they can't have a relationship with me because I'm a depraved piece of shit. And they have all the answers. Oh, we don't have all the answers. Yes, you fucking claim to have all the answers. And you know you do. You know you claim to know what can't be known by us puny Homo sapiens. You just can't get to a point of honesty, which was a massive, massive breakthrough for me. Getting at a point where I go, okay, this may not make as much sense as I think it does. I have been often accused of being an arrogant intellectual. Maybe I am. Could be, possibly. But I don't claim to know the ultimate answers. You do. Those are my thoughts. I'm going to stop right there, pick this up, maybe a little bit more in depth if I get any response to this video. But take care of yourself. It's really, really important to focus on your well-being as a person. It's really, really important to start learning the skills of skepticism. And if you want to take on a little bit of contrariness, enjoy. It's kind of fun, really. You don't do it to get even with people. You do it because it's a fun way to test yourself, to check yourself, to make sure that you understand the arguments both for and against as best as you can. So anyway, enough of all of that. Thanks for listening. Hope you have a great day and take care of yourself.